Good evening. I'd like to welcome City of Milton Police Chaplain Remco Bromett, who will lead us in our invocation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to join me in prayer. Almighty God, we come before you at the beginning of this meeting to pause and pray, to invoke your presence here tonight, in recognition of the fact that your scriptures say that civil servants, civil authorities, whether they are elected or appointed, are ministers of God put into place to bring order and discipline and good stewardship to the area that they have been appointed over. Almighty God, we ask you for wisdom tonight. We ask you for grace. We ask you for unity in mind and heart and purpose as decisions are being made. We acknowledge that you are a God and that we stand in need of that wisdom, divine wisdom, that so often supersedes our own natural abilities. We ask you that you fill this room with your presence and that you would minister to every member of the council and the mayor and every other person that has something to do with something that has to be decided tonight. We thank you for the privilege of serving you this way tonight. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, June 15th, 2009 to order. Will the City Clerk please call the roll and make general announcements?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call roll for the June 15th, 2009 regular meeting. However, I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Additionally, those attending the meeting who would like to provide public comment, either during the public hearings or during the call for public comment, we do require that you complete a public comment card prior to speaking on that item. There is no public comment for consent agenda items or items under first presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in order that the speaker cards were received by City Clerk staff prior to the meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization if applicable. When you hear the bell, you'll have 30 seconds to complete your remarks. The City Council may allow public comment on either an agenda item or a general public comment from a representative of such an organized group or association, provided, however, that such an individual shall file a notarized affidavit that they have the authority to speak on behalf of said organization. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you would expect to receive yourself. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Thurman.
Here.
Councilmember Julie Zonner Bailey.
Present.
Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Bert Hewitt.
Here.
Councilmember Tina Diaversa.
Here.
Councilmember Alan Tart.
Here.
Thank you. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. And again, good evening. Welcome to the City of Milton. I also like to recognize a special person here, Councilman Jim Payne, who's also the Mayor Pro Tem of City of Alpharetta. I want to thank you for being here. Will the City Clerk please sound the next item?
Next item is approval of the meeting agenda. Agenda item number 09877.
Are there any other items to be considered? Staff or council? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve the meeting agenda. Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Hewitt and I believe a second from Councilmember Tart. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay. Next item is public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and the city council and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. There's no discussion on items on the consent agenda for first presentation or from the public or from council. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk. Please remember, this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of the city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone, stating your name and address for the record. You will have 5 minutes for your remarks. Do we have any public comment?
Mr. Bill O'Connor.
Good evening. Bill O'Connor, 450 Arcaro Drive in Milton. Thank you, Your Honor. I have a problem, and I do not know how to resolve it, having tried what I think is long reasonable means. I have a new home in Milton. I have substantial electrical problems in that new home, and electricians tell me it is due to faulty installation, problems that should have been caught upon inspection. I forwarded a letter on April 15 to Ms. Henderson and copied the mayor, requesting inspection records. On May 14, having had no response, I called the mayor. I do thank you, Mayor, for responding to me. At that point, Ms. Henderson said she had never received my letter. I then emailed records, faxed records, and spoke with her. And today, on June 15, I have nothing. So at this point, I am left with the feeling that the city has not engaged competent inspection, and the city chooses not to respond to its taxpayers. What do I do?
Thank you, sir. We're not able to discuss this with you, but we will definitely have staff and we'll contact you tomorrow on that.
Thank you very much.
That completes public comment.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Will the city clerk please sound the items?
Approval of the June 1st, 2009 regular meeting minutes. Agenda item number 09878. Approval of the financial statements for the period ending May 2009. Agenda item number 09879. And approval of City Hall Space Facility Needs Analysis Agreement with consultant Lyman Davidson and Dooley Incorporated for $12,800. Agenda item number 09880.
Do I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve the consent agenda items.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Tartt, second by Councilmember Hewitt.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on to reports and presentations. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
We have a presentation from the Milton Public Safety Fund. It's a grant presentation. Ms. Jan Fowler.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City staff. On behalf of Milton Public Safety Fund, we've been doing some fundraising, as you know, the past year, including our golf tournament last August and a couple of other events. And so earlier this year, we presented a $4,000 check for a piece of firefighter rehab equipment. And tonight we have some additional checks to present. One is the amount of $1,673. And I can tell you what they're for, but I think the firefighters and the police officers can better explain what they are exactly. But this is for a Tactron Incident Command System. Chris, can you kind of explain what that is?
Yes, ma'am. It's an accountability system for use by police and fire at large-scale incidents to keep track of all their equipment and personnel in the event that multiple jurisdictions are involved or multiple departments, for them to keep track of everyone.
Okay, the next check is for in the amount of $1,821.95, and that's for law enforcement incident command vests. Can you explain that? Officer Frazier, can you explain what those are? You know, I'm sorry, I'm putting these guys on the spot. They didn't know I was going to call on them.
I'm going to assume these are the same vests used by the fire service, but with law enforcement titles, so the people in charge are identifiable.
All right. It reports on large incidents, who's doing what responsibility at that particular incident. For example, if Milton and Alpharetta have to both respond on a scene, someone in Alpharetta might not know someone in Milton and what their position is, and this will identify them as safety or first aid or fire or whatever. And then the last check is for $2,519, and that was for police flashlights, holders, and some deer whistles for fire trucks and police cars. And also, I think they have enough that they purchased some that the citizens can pick them up also. And actually, Officer Hayes has one of the new flashlights already on his belt. So it's a high-powered, lightweight flashlight. It's much less cumbersome than the standard issue that they had before. Yeah, don't blind anybody with it, Bill. So that's the third check. That brings our total so far for this year. Tonight is $6,000.14 worth of donations, and bringing our 2009 total to close to $10,000. And we hope to do a lot more. We will be having our golf tournament this year. We're going to have it in October rather than August, so it'll be a little cooler. And so we hope to raise a lot more money for the police and fire departments. Thank you.
Jan, if you guys don't mind staying there, first I want to say thank you so much for all you've done, and the rest of the group that's with the Public Safety Fund. This obviously means so much more than just the money that you've raised. I know to these guys, the fire and the police and city council, staff, our citizens, it's amazing what you guys have done. And like I say, it's awesome that you've raised the money, but it means a lot more than just the money. It's letting our guys know that put their life on the line every day for every one of our citizens, letting them know that we care and are trying to go the extra mile and give them a little bit of extra safety gear and stuff. So thank you very much. And at this time, I want to see if the council would mind coming down and we'll get a picture with you guys.
Great.
Guys, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to see you out there at the school. Nice to see you, sir. Thank you. It's good to see you.
Always a pleasure. City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Next, we have a proclamation, Amateur Radio Week. This has been accepted by North Fulton Amateur Radio League President Mac McCormick.
Mac would step forward now.
Can I bring a couple of my club members? We're all Milton citizens, so pleased to be here. Hey, good to see you. Good to see you. Ian Kahn. Hey, Ian. How are you? Hey,
Dick, nice to meet you. Let me present this to you guys. Jim here. There you come. Come on up, Jim. It's my pleasure to present this proclamation. This proclamation for Amateur Radio Week. Whereas amateur radio operators are celebrating over a century of human voice broadcast over the airways, and amateur radio continues to provide a bridge between peoples, societies, and countries, creating friendship and sharing of ideas. And whereas the North Fulton Amateur Radio League members have provided countless hours of uncompensated community service by providing backup communication services to the Milton Public Safety Department, communications to local charitable events, and other organizations throughout the region. And whereas the City of Milton recognizes and appreciates the diligence of these hams who also serve as weather spotters in the Skywarn program of the National Weather Service and provide relevance in our modern, highly technical world by providing emergency communications when other systems may fail. And whereas the North Fulton Amateur Radio League will participate in a yearly national event sponsored by the ARRL called Field Day as an emergency preparedness exercise that will take place on June 27th and June 28th, 2009. This event will demonstrate amateur radio skills and readiness to provide self-supporting communications with without further infrastructure being required. Now therefore, we, the mayor and the council of the city of Milton, hereby recognize and proclaim the week of June 22nd through June 28th, 2009 as Amateur Radio Week in the city of Milton, Georgia, and urge all citizens to recognize the importance of this event and the significance of amateur radio to our citizens and our community. Given under my hand the seal of the city of Milton on this 15th day of June, 2009, Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Yeah, we'd love to have you come out for field day on the 27th and 28th at, we're going to be at Roswell Park Extension this year. You have the handout. That's it. Thank you.
Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Our next item is a Granicus demo streaming presentation. Mr. Kelly Christie. Cameraman? Photographer?
As most of you know, we started last year on an initiative to begin what we call web streaming our council meetings as well as some other boards and commission meetings that we have here in Milton. Basically, web streaming, for those that don't know, is we're basically going to put you guys on the web. Call it YouTube for Milton, whatever you want to call it. But tonight, we kind of just wanted to show you what it's going to look like. We've still got a little bit of stuff to work on as far as implementing it with our current website. If you look here on my left and on my right, this is actually, and it's kind of hard to see with that glare, we're on about a 15-second delay. But this is exactly what it's going to look like. Once we get it on our website, there'll be an extra link that says, click here to view. We haven't kind of hammered out the verbiage yet. And the citizens will be able to log on to the website, click on, and they'll be able to basically just watch the entire meeting live as it's happening. The beauty of this as well is they get, as you see, the agenda right there next to them, and they can read through it. And at the end of the meeting, once it's published by our clerk's office, they will be able to view old meetings as well, previously recorded meetings. And what we'll do, I'll probably bring that again and kind of show you that part because it's really a neat software. It actually enables them to hyperlink inside the agenda so they don't have to watch the entire meeting again. They can click on certain agenda items that they want to view, and it brings up that certain particular part. So we are looking at going live on July 6th. So I'll be doing makeup in my office for anybody that needs it. Makeup and hair. Yeah.
Costumes and all.
Yes. So just wanted to kind of just show you what it looks like, and we're going to leave this up for the rest of the meeting. It's not streaming live yet, so don't fret. It's just basically here for you guys to see. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. But other than that, just enjoy.
Thank you. Any questions, Kelly? Councilmember Bailey?
And it may be more for the city clerk, and just in terms of ease of connecting, like minutes and other things. I know that right now our website has minutes in a separate location. Will this ultimately also provide citizens the opportunity for those minutes tied to the agenda in that section?
Yes.
So it'll all be kind of compartmentalized?
They will be able to see minutes, both the action minutes as well as action minutes as quick as we can, probably the next day, and then they get the full minutes after we get
But
them.
ultimately be kind of bundled together for ease of location. Thank you.
Okay, there's no items under first presentation, so we'll move on to our public hearings. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
This is the second public hearing, approval of an ordinance to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, amending the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. This is item number 09871. Ms. Stacy Inglis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As with numerous other municipalities, the current economic climate has had a negative impact on our revenue sources. Therefore, staff is recommending a decrease of approximately $1.5 million to our overall revenue appropriations. That accounts for 6.5% decrease in initial projections. The most significant changes are as follows. When the projections for the 2009 budget were compiled, we used a collection rate of 93% for property taxes. However, the last 2 years, we've seen a collection rate of 89%. To be conservative, we are decreasing the real and personal property taxes for the current year by approximately $1 million to bring it in line with prior year trends. We are decreasing the utility tax line item by $524,000 due to a correction in the digest from an error that occurred in the previous year's tax digest. Based on the Georgia Department of Revenue, last year's digest for the utility property within Milton was inadvertently included in other property within the county. Therefore, the error greatly reduced the amount of taxes owed to the city. Since the collection rate for last year's property taxes was expected to be higher than 89%, the fiscal year 2009 prior year property tax revenue line item was projected at a low rate. A combined increase of $435,000 is being suggested based on actuals in the real and personal prior year property tax line items. The franchise fees we've actually experienced higher than initially anticipated in this line item. The fees collected from Georgia Power and Sonic EMC this year were considerably higher. An increase of $300,000 is being suggested. The local option sales taxes are trending almost 13% lower at the time I was doing this budget amendment than last year. A decrease of $607,000 is recommended. Currently, only 82% of Milton's businesses have renewed their business license. Collection efforts are underway to encourage the remaining active businesses to renew. However, because of business closings and lower than anticipated license fees, a decrease of $70,000 is being suggested. We were able to offset this revenue shortfall without cutting positions and without cutting services for our citizens. I'm going to highlight now the most significant cuts that we made. In the Mayor and Council's budget, we decreased it by $56,000 due in large part to the vacant executive aide position. That position's not been cut. It's just been vacant up to this point. The city manager's budget was reduced by roughly $105,000 due mainly to the vacant assistant city manager position. Again, that position's not been cut. In the general administration budget, we have an increase of $29,000 to account for various fees not included in the initial projections, and a decrease of $58,000 primarily due to the excess liability insurance that is already included in the monthly payment to CH2M Hill. Overall, this represents a budget decrease of approximately $30,000. There's an increase of $18,000 in the IT budget due to a formula error on the original budget spreadsheets. In municipal court, there is an overall decrease of $9,000 since we decided to hire bailiffs to secure our courts instead of outsourcing it. The public safety admin budget was reduced by $151,000. Three things contributed to this decrease. The elimination of the public safety director position, gas prices have gone down significantly from the time that we were putting the budget together, and the security measures that we were going to implement have been deemed unnecessary at this time. In the police budget, we have an increase of $88,000 to account for additional workers' comp and flexible spending benefits costs, and a decrease of $143,000 due mainly in part to a vacant position that is on hold until the next fiscal year. Overall, this represents a decrease of $55,000. The fire department has an increase of $94,000. This is due largely in part to two positions that were mistakenly left out of the compilation of the salary and benefits cost in the initial budget. Public Works has a decrease of $545,000. Of this amount, $433,000 is actually being transferred over to the Capital Projects Fund for the MPDES project. We also cut $85,000 for pothole repairs because this is included in the CH2M Hill contract. $25,000 was cut because we were able to perform the speed zoning request in-house. And another $50,000 was cut because snow and ice control were not necessary this fiscal year. We were able to cut $20,000 out of Parks and Recreation budget. This figure included an increase of $12,000 for facility repairs and maintenance, and a decrease of $32,000 for the installation of the well at Bell Memorial Park. And that can be covered in the Capital Projects Fund when the time is right. We reduced the community development budget by $73,000 because several projects that were initially projected to be outsourced have been able to be performed in-house due to our diligent staff and our committee members. The most significant decrease came from the fact that the funds we were going to put into reserves to fully fund them at the required 2 months of operating expenses weren't needed. We met that requirement last year. Because of this and other cuts that I'll explain in just a minute, we were able to decrease other financing uses by $559,000. In the confiscated assets fund, the activities in it accounts for the activities of the narcotics detective. Since this position is not considered a necessity, it has been decided that at this time we are going to cut this budget entirely. This is in the amount of $74,000. Skipping over to the capital projects fund, there's several things going on in the adjustments here. Again, we're showing the transfer of the MPDS project from the general fund over to the capital projects fund. That is $433,000 increase. We transferred appropriations for an advanced life support equipment from the general fund. This is coming out of the fire department budget. It was a decrease of $30,000 there. We also added $20,000 due to the project cost. There were several projects that are being eliminated. Of those, the council chamber improvements, we've cut that. It's $100,000, as well as the audiovisual upgrade. Sorry. Both of those are not necessary at this time. That adds up to $180,000. The air and light cascade system, since we have an IGA with Alpharetta, we have access to 2 of these systems, and so we do not need to purchase one. That is $90,000 decrease in the budget. There's a couple of other just housekeeping issues. We're combining the resurfacing and patching of arterials and collectors and the resurfaced local roads into one line item for pavement management. So overall, there's an increase in the capital projects fund of $36,000. Those are the main decreases and increases, just amendments in the budget. I'll entertain questions at this time if you have them.
Do you have any questions from our council for our staff on this?
You'll have an opportunity during unfinished business to ask any of those questions. If you want to hold a public hearing, that would be good.
All right, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and close this public hearing. Okay. Moving on to alcohol beverage license applications. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Approval of an alcohol beverage license application for N&L Restoration doing business as Cans Taqueria. Is that right? Tequila Bar located at 12635 Crabapple Road, Suite 320, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is Larry Stepp for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, and distilled spirits. Agenda item number 09881. Ms. Inglis?
The applicant has followed all of the requirements, and the staff recommends approval of this item. This is going into the old Foster's location in Crabapple. Nope. Sorry, I was told wrong.
Cantina Del Mar.
Oh. Del Mar.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about that.
Is there any questions from council, Ms. Inglis, on this? Okay. Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, this public hearing is now closed. Any more public or council discussion or questions? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
I'd like to make a motion to approve an alcohol beverage license application for N&L Restoration doing businesses Cans Taqueria and Tequila Bar located at 12635 Crabapple Road, Suite 320, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is Larry Stepp for consumption on the premises of wine, malt beverage, and distilled spirits.
Second motion.
I had a motion by Councilmember Hewitt, and I believe, did Councilmember Tart, did you?
I did.
I have a second by Councilmember Tart. Sorry, Councilmember Lusk. All right, I have the motion and a second. So is there any other council discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Next is approval of an alcohol beverage license application for Grey Doster LLC, doing business as Q, located at 13700 Highway 9, Suite 300, Milton, Georgia. The applicant is Paul J. Doster for consumption on premises, wine, malt, beverage. Item number 09882. Ms. Inglis?
This applicant has also followed all the requirements of the city, and staff recommends approval of this license. And this is in the Rocco's Mom's Kitchen old location. I know that for sure.
We've been there once.
Okay, is there any questions for staff, council? Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, public hearing is now closed. Is there any council discussion at this point?
Where is that?
It's up on Highway 9
Yeah, it's
on the,
across from Domino's.
up on the left end going north.
Oh, I know where that is. All right.
All right, do I have a motion and a second?
I move to approve an alcohol beverage license application for Grey Doster LLC, doing business as Q, located at 13,700 Highway 9, Suite 300, Milton, Georgia.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Diaversa.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on to the zoning agenda. Will the city clerk please read the zoning rules and sound the next item?
At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the mayor and city council shall consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted time. City clerk staff will be keeping track of the time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Those called to speak will be taken in order that the speaker cards will receive by city clerk staff prior to the meeting. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. The Planning Commission heard the rezoning agenda items and recommendations have been forwarded to the mayor and city council for consideration and disposition. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the council during the meeting unless requested to do so. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the City Attorney's Office strongly suggests that you ask someone to speak on your point of view. Our first item on the zoning agenda is U09-01/VC09-01 at 13120 Arnold Mill Road by Frank Schaefer, the Landscape Group Incorporated, to obtain a use permit for a landscaping business on 1.74 acres at a density of 3,908.04 square feet per acre, Article 19.4.27. The applicant is also requesting a 3-part concurrent variance to number 1, delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the west property line from the right-of-way for a distance of 140 feet, 12H.3.1, Section C1, and 2, to delete the 50-foot buffer and 10-foot improvement setback along the east property line from the right-of-way for a distance of 140 feet, 12H.3.1, Section C1, and 3, to allow a sign located less than 10 feet from the right-of-way, Article 33, Section 21.c. This is agenda item number 09813, first presentation on March the 2nd, 2009, and was deferred on May 18th, 2009. Ms. Alice Wakefield.
As was stated, this is a request for a use permit for a landscape business with a 3-part concurrent variance. This matter was first before this body on April the 27th, at which time a deferral was granted to allow staff the opportunity to get additional information regarding septic and also some information from the Fulton County Health Department. This item was also before this body on May 18, 2009, at which time staff recommended a deferral because we had not received information from the Fulton County Health Department at that time. Staff had also asked the applicant to provide a revised site plan that would be submitted in a timely manner to be reviewed for this council meeting. Staff did not receive the revised site plan until June 9th. In addition, after reviewing the site plan, it's staff's opinion that the site plan needs to be better prepared such that the dimensions were sketched in by hand, so there's no way to verify the accuracy. So we've asked the applicant to submit a better site plan. Therefore, staff is asking for a deferral until the July meeting.
Okay, is there any questions from council on front for our staff before we go into public comment?
Alice, what was the date on that? July what?
It is July 20th, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, first, let's hear from those speaking in support of the use permit and variances.
Mr. Frank Schaefer?
Hello. Frank Schaefer, 1041 Hidden Hollow Drive, Marietta, Georgia, 30068. I represent the Landscape Group Incorporated, and we were informed by Robin that we should request a deferral to get the proper survey of our property to make sure that we comply with the needs of the council to make sure that we're okay. And so I think Robin's going to talk about today, and I just want to be here and say that we will support anything that Robin suggests.
Okay.
That completes public comment.
Completes public comment? Okay. I'm going to close this public hearing on this now. Is there any council discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for U09-01, VC 09-01, to allow the deferral as requested by applicant and staff.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember D'Aversa. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Item number 2 is U09-02, VC 09-02 at 15150 Birmingham Highway. Applicant is Rob Nestor to obtain a use permit for a landscaping business on 3.926 acres at a density of 387.92 square feet per acre. Article 19.4.27. The applicant is also requesting concurrent variance to allow access from a local street. Article 19.4.27.B.1. Item number 09836. First presentation on April 13th, deferred April 27th, 2009. Ms. Alice Wakefield.
As was stated, this also is a landscape business with a use permit for a landscape business with a 3-part concurrent variance. This matter was before Mayor and City Council on April the 27th, at which time a deferral was granted to allow the applicant the opportunity to add additional concurrent variances to address the existing structures on the site. As you know, when you add concurrent variances, it has to go back to the Planning Commission. This matter went to the Planning Commission on May 26, 2009. However, the Planning Commission recommended a deferral to allow the applicant to submit a revised survey. Therefore, staff is asking that this matter be deferred until the July 20th Mayor and City Council meeting. It will go to the Planning Commission on June 23rd.
Again, is there any questions of staff on this item? Okay, now I'd like to, any comments from in support of this application from the public?
There's no public comment card submitted, sir.
Okay. Then I'm going to close this public hearing. Now, is there any council questions or discussion for staff? Okay. Do I have a motion and a second?
I'd like to make a motion to defer U09-02, VC09-02, agenda item 09836, to the July 20th council meeting.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Tartt, second by Councilmember Hewitt. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Item number 3 is RZ 09-02, text amendment to amend Article 22.3.1, variances, variance considerations. This is agenda item number 09869, first presentation on June 1st, 2009. Ms. Alice Wakefield.
This is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, Article 22, which is the section related to appeals. This is in regards to variance considerations for signs. We're just trying to clean up the language to make it a little bit clearer that relief to the sign ordinance may only be granted where existing foliages or structures bring about a hardship whereby a sign meets maximum letter size, square footage, height requirement cannot be read from an adjoining public road. Now, both the Planning Commission and staff recommend approval, with the exception that the Planning Commission did not feel that it was necessary to have the word maximum in the standard, but staff feels that that word just brings additional clarification to it.
Is there any questions? Ms. Wakefield?
I guess my question is concerning the maximum letter size. How is that determined? Because a lot of times it's logos. I mean, I'm afraid putting maximum in there may actually confuse things more, because you can't have, typically on a sign, it's, you may not have all your letters being the maximum size,
That's correct.
because you have a logo or something with it. So I guess, is it better to have maximum in there? Is it better just not to have it in there at all and assume that, because regardless, the BZA has the authority to say yes or no.
That is correct. I understand your point, and I don't know if the city attorney wants to.
I understand you
weigh in.
loud and clear as well, Councilmember. The only thing I would offer up is that, and why I understand what staff is trying to do, is that before you authorize seeking a variance to your rules, the message you're giving back to the sign owner is you have to do everything within your power, within whatever we will allow under our ordinance, to make the sign readable without a variance first. And then if you can't do that, which means using the, because there are objective maximum signs or sizes for
Yes.
these. But I think what you're saying is, but sometimes sign are a hodgepodge. Some
Right,
the maximum,
right.
some smaller,
And there are times that you may rather give them a foot variance than have the letters be bigger than, that don't look as good. So, I think we're taking away some of the
and that's
flexibility.
that's why we're in the enviable position of asking you all to make that policy determination. But I understand, at least I understand what staff was trying to do, and that is to put the burden on the sign owner to have to maximize what the law allows before they seek a variance. I
Well,
think that was the intent.
I mean, I think sometimes if your rules are too strict, you may achieve the rule but not really achieve what is best for the area.
I understand.
And I think that in this case, I would rather not have maximum in there and let the BZA, they can always deny it, and I'm sure they're plenty capable of denying things. So I would rather not have the maximum in there than always have every sign be in maximum letters.
Julie?
I do understand the point about maximum with letters. One question, Mrs. Wakefield, maybe you could address this. Without having that other language before us, I'll ask you, within the signs and some of the overlays, I know that there's some proportionality that gets discussed, I thought, that talks maybe not about maximum letter, but that there are proportions of signs. It's the height and width and different things. And I know that in theory, some of those proportions of height and width relative to the overall sign size could effectively limit the size of a particular letter. So I'm wondering if there's not some language there that avoids the risk of somebody trying to come in with really large letters and still have the ability to address what staff was saying they were concerned about. So I just throw that out there as something to consider.
I mean, as Robin was just saying, we could just say the maximum square footage, and that would, in height, and that would take care of that.
That's fine.
Okay.
To me, that makes it easier because,
So take out letter size.
take out letter size.
Or you could just leave out the maximum in front of letter size and start maximum at height and square footage.
I think I meet letter size regardless.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't think you need letter size in there at all.
You clear on that, like the city attorney as well as staff? The intent?
Yes.
And my one other question, Mayor, would just be, I know that the Planning Commission in particular had wanted to substitute maximum for minimum because they felt that that was a reversal of the logic. And so again, just to be sensitive to their concerns. I think that this accomplishes both, but I would ask for Mrs. Wakefield and perhaps Mr. Gerard to speak to that.
The only issue, and it's one of those sort of ivory tower esoteric things that you might not even think about till it comes up, is will we be in a situation where someone comes and seeks a variance to their sign, and you're looking to Alice and she reports, and the letter size of the sign is not as large as it could be, and if the letters were larger, it could be read at the distances that are being complained of. And is that going to work against them when they seek a variance? The council or the BZA may say, if you made your letters bigger, wouldn't be in this problem. We could read your. So I mean, and maybe
That's what
the
they ought to
council
say.
is comfortable saying that's for the BZA to make that call.
That's what they ought to say. They ought to say, hey, make your letters bigger, or don't worry about the variance.
That's fine. That's
Bill, you have a question?
I think we addressed the case in point here tonight when we approved an alcohol beverage license for the Q Restaurant, C-U-E. And I can't imagine their name in 4-inch letters on a 2-by-4-foot sign. So I think it's a good point. I'd agree to eliminate maximum or minimum.
Okay. At this point, do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
So then I'm going to close the public hearing and now open it up for any more council discussion. Julie?
I guess asking the question slightly differently, but just to be sure that from a legal perspective, knowing that the Board of Zoning Appeals had hoped to have some clear direction so that when these variances do come to them, that they're both in compliance with the intent of the law as well as giving them the parameters that they need. Do you, Mr. Jard, feel that we accomplished that with this modification?
Councilmember Zonner Bailey, I am comfortable.
Okay.
I mean, we have gone through the various arguments here, but there's nothing one way or the other that makes this less or more legal. I'm very comfortable with it.
And that way, when it goes to the BZA, they still have the parameters that they need to keep them within the confines of what that was intended to be.
They do, and within the hardship language, the BZA could simply say, it's not a hardship. You've not maximized what the law would allow you to do. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. No more questions? I have a motion and a second.
Mayor, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item 09869 and 09870. Is it both of those? Or just for RZ 09-02 and RZ 0903 as presented, removing though the words letter size from 22.3.1.1.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
need to do these separate.
We do, and Mr.
We do it
Councilman,
separate?
I
Okay.
apologize. I didn't speak quickly enough.
Okay, agenda item 09-869, RZ 09-02, as presented, removing under section 22.3.1, the word letter size.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember DeVersa. Any discussion?
I have one question because the way you read the motion, I understand what you're trying to do, but the way you read the motion, you're working off of what is written in the ordinance now. And so the insertion, the move of the word only was not captured in your motion. And also, the current ordinance has minimum in it.
No, I said as presented by staff, so that would be what's
So
in
you
front
said
of it.
as presented by staff with,
Deleting the words letter size out of that one section.
okay, so it would read whereby a sign meeting maximum square footage and height requirements cannot be read, blah, 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 blah.
And I just asked the
Yes.
staff and legal and city manager, okay. All right, have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
City clerk, please sound the next item.
RZ 0903, text amendment to amend Article 33, signs, Section 11, considerations. This is agenda item number 09870, first presentation on June 1st, 2009. Ms. Wakefield?
This is the same situation as the previous item, except for this is addressing Article 33 of the zoning ordinance, which is the sign ordinance, a portion. And within that particular document, there is a standard related to variances. And in order to, we want to make the language consistent. So we're asking that this body approve the same language with the removal of letter size.
No
Maybe
public comment.
Okay, well, I'm going to close the public hearing and now ask for any council discussion. Okay, if no discussion, do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 08-870, which is RZ 09-03, as presented by staff, excluding the word letter size from section 11D.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember Tartt. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
Approval of an ordinance to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, amending the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. First presentation and first hearing on June 1st, 2009. Second public hearing on June 15th, 2009. This is item number 09871. Ms. Inglis.
Staff is recommending a decrease in the budget to account for revenue shortfalls in the amount of $1,492,860. We have held the two public hearings required by state statute, and at this time I'll answer any additional questions you may have.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Inglis? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
Mayor, I'll put forward a motion.
Okay.
Yes, I would put forward a motion to approve the amendments as presented by our finance director and our city manager, approving the ordinance to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2009 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, amending the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available.
I'll second it.
Okay, I got a motion by Councilmember Bailey, a second by Councilmember Tartt. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those
Well,
in
I just
favor?
want to take a second to thank Stacy and Chris. They spent about 2.5 hours going over line by line with me of all the changes in the budget, and I just want to thank them for taking that time to make sure I was very comfortable with it. So,
And I'll say ditto, because similarly, I think not only did Councilmember Thurman, but I think a number of those on this body did the same thing, and not only were they well-versed, but they were more than responsive multiple times, and it's very appreciative and very reflective of their efforts, and many, many thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Chris.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. Will the city clerk please sound the next item?
A resolution establishing the City of Milton Community Identification Sign Program, agenda item number 09883. Ms. Wakefield?
Yes. Back in March of this year, Mr. Buckbill, along with several business owners in the Crabapple area, approached the City Council seeking permission to install several banners as a means to not only promote the Crabapple area, but to create community identity and pride. The Community Development Department was directed by Council to research the matter and come back to the City Council with a proposal of how such signs could be allowed without violating the sign ordinance or opening the door for sign clutter. The purpose of this resolution is the results of staff's work, and with the project manager being Angela Rambo. You guys don't get to see Angela that much, but she's hiding back there in the back. So what the Community Development Department is proposing at this time is the creation of a community identification sign program. The community ID program, in terms of this policy, are banners displayed on light poles in the right-of-way designed to acknowledge distinct and unique commercial areas in the city. This policy is consistent with the sign ordinance and does not, in of itself, necessitate any changes to the municipal code regarding signage. The community development proposes that the community ID signs be considered for the following areas: Crabapple Cross Road, as defined in the overlay, the Birmingham Cross Road, Highway 9 commercial corridor area. The Design Review Board reviewed this proposal on June 2nd and voted unanimously to recommend approval of the program. I have passed out earlier revised copies based on comments that I received from the city attorney, and I'll go through those quickly. The first item is on page 1, where we have definition. We had said in city right-of-way, but in some cases we may be dealing with the state right-of-way. So we just took out the word city. That is on the second page. That is the same for item 5, where it says right-of-way. We have removed the word city. Down at the bottom of that page, item 11, we revised the language per the city attorney that it would be as proposed by interested citizens and stakeholder groups. We don't want to eliminate the opportunity for anyone to make a request. In addition, on the next page in 12F, some additional language that was added by the city attorney was that the city of Milton shall be authorized to require proof of a long-term maintenance funding viability. The next one is item 3, where we inserted the language, in addition, it's like the second sentence, in addition, if applicable, the proposal will be reviewed by the utility company and the Georgia Department of Transportation. I want to thank the Public Works Director for reminding me that the city did not own all the roads and they didn't own the light poles. So we changed that language, and there are procedures with both companies, both Georgia Power and Georgia DOT, to allow these types of banners on their poles. As part of the approval process, when one of these requests come forward, we will make sure that we get comments and approval from those two entities. And in item number 15, we have some additional language added by the City Council related to that in the public utilities and are the Georgia Department of Transportation that has easement right in the right-of-way or ownership right in the structure where the signs are to be placed. This is again acknowledging that both of those entities will have to sign off on it. And with that said, staff's recommendation, along with the Design Review Board, is approval.
Okay, do I have any questions from council? Ms. Wakefield. Alan?
In item number 2 on page 2, where we define the established or unique areas, we define via the overlays what the Crabapple Crossroads and Birmingham Crossroads area would entail. We don't define what the Highway 9 commercial corridor, I hate that term, some of us would share, but is there a way to define where we're talking about there?
I mean,
we're talking about all of Highway 9, all the way from the Alpharetta City Milton line, or all the way up to Forsyth County, or where are we talking about there?
Well, and we left the language vague so that when the stakeholder groups come through, we could define the boundary at that time. Because I did want to say the Highway 9 overlay, because that's much more than just the Highway 9 corridor. It's kind of easy with Crabapple and Birmingham because it's very confined, the boundaries are. I mean, we can define it and bring that back to you.
Defining it as Highway 9 probably is the most appropriate, though, because you wouldn't want the tributaries to be included since they're primarily residential, in my opinion.
The other, and this is a statement, not necessarily a question, but item number 7, anywhere where you say community identification sign, for parallel structure within the rest of the document, especially within permitted uses section, it really needs to say community identification signs, and that's done 3 times. And item number 7. Yeah, can you, and then, and I guess I would put this in a motion, but to, back to item number 2, instead of saying the Highway 9 commercial corridor, I guess my motion would be, will be to just say Highway 9. Let's see, there was some more. Is there, in item number 14 that deals with the city council being the one to approve or deny the application, would there be an appeal process in place, or would the decision of the council be final, or does it then, are they then able to appeal to some other body?
I think I can take that one. Councilmember Tartt, without an identified appellate process, the appellate process would be by way of either writ of cert or some other process to the Superior Court. This does not have within it an appellate process.
Okay. And the other addition I would add to 18, the mayor and the city council reserve the right to remove any community identification sign without cause. As part of the motion, I would say the right to authorize the removal of, because I don't think I'm going to get out there on the ladder and remove any sign, even if I don't like it. The other question I had is, you made a statement, Mrs. Wakefield, that the fact that this does not conflict with our sign ordinance, and I guess I'm confused. I need a little explanation there, because if these banners that have been brought before us before, unless I'm mistaken, those banners, as what has been proposed thus far, would conflict with our sign ordinance in the way it's written now, would it not?
Well, the way it was proposed before, a couple of things. There was not any type of program that would allow these signs. Most of these businesses where they were requesting to put the banners, they already have their freestanding sign and their walled sign. And secondly, given the fact that we've structured this such that the signs would be basically in the right-of-way, and the sign ordinance does not apply to the right-of-way. It's
So the
public
sign ordinance
space.
is basically silent where this one picks up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure they weren't in contradiction to one another. All right, that's all I have.
Julie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First of all, Mrs. Wakefield, I know that you mentioned that this went to the Design Review Board. Did this also go to the Planning Commission?
No, it did not.
Okay. A recommendation would be that we give the opportunity of our Planning Commission members to see this. I believe that should be part of our process. Under number 2, and I'll just expound on the question or statements that I think I heard Councilmember Tartt and Councilwoman DeVersa mention. With regards to Highway 9, the commercial corridor, I agree that we want to be as specific as we can without being overly limiting and also without being too expansive. I would recommend that perhaps if this is going to go back to the Planning Commission, I heard staff say that they would be willing to perhaps better define that. Just because clarity, I think, usually serves us well and helps set the expectations for any of these groups that would be coming forward. I would recommend that we would want to specifically define what that means, especially if it's not going to be defined by the Highway 9 overlay. Again, even if it's just to give geographic boundaries, because again, without that, I think it just leaves too much up for misinterpretation, possibly. As it relates to perhaps under permitted uses, items number 3 through 11, I don't know where these questions specifically would pertain, but I'll just ask them generally. I do support a sign program like this. The questions I have, however, have to do with frequency of signs. As an example, I know that one of the intents of this is to help positively promote a particular area, and yet, as stated in our whereas statements, we don't want to do anything that would take away from the sense of uniqueness. I'm concerned that without speaking to the frequency or size of these banners, because it is outside of our sign ordinance, that we could end up with some unintended consequences. And so I just would ask that we give consideration, we ask our staff and maybe the Planning Commission to think about how we would take away some of that subjectivity. Obviously, the Design Review Board would be reviewing this, which would be a positive, but I'd like us to at least give consideration, because I could see how we would have some very different views throughout the community in terms of how many is too many and how many is just right. It's kind of like porridge, you know, is it too hot or too cold, or is it just right? And I do think that giving some thought to that in advance would be helpful, and it would help achieve our goals. With regards to size of those banners, I would ask for the same consideration, that we give some thought. The third would be clarification as it relates to what can be on these signs. I'm assuming that it's not promoting individual businesses, but it's instead promoting the uniqueness of an area. But because this language and document is silent on that, as long as the intent is not to promote individual businesses, I think we need to make that statement clear, because it's not clear in this document. So I just think we have an opportunity to be more specific so as to remove potential questions going forward. And I think also we just remove competing agendas, because I think, again, the goal is to help promote the collective community within these areas. Knowing that Crabapple is different from Birmingham, is different from Highway 9, the frequency, the size, as well as the messaging on these, I think could be quite different. I'm not sure how best to capture that, but obviously what's rural to Crabapple is very different from what's rural in Birmingham, possibly, which is perhaps different from what's unique to Highway 9. Again, my goal would be that we try to do something to remove that potential subjectivity. I just think we've made a lot of great progress in communicating our intent with our sign ordinance, and I think we had that opportunity here, while similarly helping promote a positive community identification sign program. Item F, and I think I heard this was an addition under 12F from the city attorney, where it now inserts, shall be authorized to require proof of long-term maintenance funding. Do we want to define what require proof is? I mean, are you comfortable with that we'll know it when we see it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. 'Cause we talked about that, in fact, on the phone with Alice and Angela. You know, typically what you're used to seeing within the context of like roads and things is literally a bonded requirement, but that's not going to work here, and I think everyone understands that. So it's sort of the thing where you might just have to give your staff the requisite authority to maybe look at some financial records to make sure that whoever it is that is warranting that they will be responsible financially for the long-term maintenance of these signs has the financial wherewithal to do that. But that's why we also put a safeguard later on in the document that says that in the event that the funding for long-term maintenance dries up, you all have the immediate right to take the signs down. You're not going to be stuck with an unfunded requirement to continue maintaining these things when the party that initiated them can't pay.
And I guess a related comment or question to that, Mr. Gerard, thank you for that input, is that it would not obligate the city, should such funding dry up, it doesn't obligate the city to continue such a program should we really not be in a position or
that was key to
do that.
Yes.
Thank you for that. With regards to the process, and it would be captured, I think, under number 14, and you mentioned that the process for any appeal of a decision, if I heard you correctly, that even though it wasn't stated this way, but it would not then go to the BZA, but instead would just have to go to an entity outside of our jurisdiction.
That's right, and any sort of appeal is going to be on very tenuous grounds. You've got to remember these are city signs in city right-of-way on typically some sort of governmental structure, so it's going to be a hard appeal to pursue.
And then my final question just relates to the language that speaks to, if I can find the number, under number 15, I'm sorry, it's not under number 15, number 14, where it says, with said approval or denial to be in the sole discretion of the council. I just wanted to verify how that language differs from the authority vested in the Design Review Board. It's I believe that when we converted our design review board from a recommending body to a decisioning body, I just wanted to see, is this language different from or in any way, not that it's in conflict, but I know this is with a different intent, is that language different than what we did when we modified the authority of the design review board?
It was my understanding that the design review board, their authority was related to the overlays and how they review site plans and the various sections of the overlay and apply those to a particular proposal. I felt that given that we were talking about signage, we were talking about public right-of-way, that it made sense that the design review board, along with staff, review and make recommendation, but the ultimate decision to approve these banners would be up to this body.
And with that all, so and I appreciate that. With this, so the language is different from what the language is there.
I think that's exactly right.
And then the other question would just be, because these are programs, it's not as though each sign necessarily for each season is going to be reviewed by a different entity, although that is, it brings to mind another question is it if the message changes, if the colors change, what is that process as opposed to this season we have a program that looks like X, but in 3 months we have a program that looks like Y. This document doesn't seem to address that, and again, I think all of our collective intent would be to have a program that we can all feel good about and embrace.
Can I offer up a response to that?
Please.
Because if you look at the structure of the entire document, you're going to have a private entity paying for the upkeep, the installation, the design, the manufacture. I think you're going to have some self-limiting strictures on how often they can change, because there's going to be some self-limiting financial restrictions on how much these folks can afford to continually flip out these signs. But if you have a jurisdiction or a sub-area node or whatever where you have groups that have the wherewithal that continue to allow for these initiatives, that they'll have these changing, my thought was, when speaking with Alice, that might be something the council would embrace if you had that sort of financial backing.
Absolutely.
To do that.
And let me clarify my point is that I would expect that they would rotate. I think that when the initial presentation was provided to us, it was with the intent that there would be some seasonal rotation. It's just simply that this document doesn't necessarily, and maybe it does because it's silent on it, but it doesn't seem to speak to the fact that if those change, that it would still come back to us. And I would just suggest that we'd want to make that clear, that it's not an approval for a program forever. It's that when those were to change, they would need to come back, because the coloring, the messaging, the size, all of that could potentially change. So again, we might need to try to capture, at least my perspective would be that we'd want to capture that somehow, so that it is clear. Because I think we do hope that it will be a successful program. I know it was first proposed for Crabapple, but I just think that these are some of the nuances that, at least from this council member's perspective, would help to enhance it and ensure that when we roll this out, we're all comfortable that language is there. So I guess overall, my comment would be if we could provide some of these nuances and changes in the written document, which I don't think would take much time at all, and also afford the Planning Commission an opportunity to review it out of consideration for them.
Okay, well, Tina?
I'll be fairly succinct because most of my questions and comments have been covered already by my fellow council members. And not to beat this not dead but live horse a little bit more, on number 2, with regard to Highway 9, I just want to make sure that we do remove commercial corridor. I'd like to see us in another forum make sure that we stop using that language. I don't think that defines anything at all. Commercial corridor doesn't define anything. There's commercial on Deerfield, there's commercial on Windward, and the fact that we've started using that is nobody's fault, but we've just kind of gotten into the habit, and citizens don't like it, and I certainly don't like it, and Alan and I have conversations about it a lot. So if the council would support another forum of making a decision not to use that. Not that it's derogatory in any way, but it just doesn't really define what we're trying to define here. And then I would make the recommendation and suggest that these signs are beneficial enough to the Windward Parkway portion of Milton as well as the Deerfield Highway portion of Windward, and maybe that type of a definition the Highway 9, Deerfield Parkway, and Windward portions as appropriate. Unique areas of Milton would be the definition that I would use. And then my other comment, Mr. Gerard, is just that we have, over the years that we have been preparing to be a city as well as that we've been a city, we have heard numerous times how challenging sign ordinances can be, sign challenges can be with regard to litigation from sign companies. And I just want to make sure that we've covered ourselves. I certainly respect your review of this and Ms. Wakefield's review of this, certainly, but just want to make sure that we haven't left ourselves open to a group that we would not want, even though we've got the approval process. We have the approval process for all our signs, but I just want to make sure that they can't come in any way and say, but you gave it to these guys, well, I want you to give it to us, and it be something that's not fitting the city of Milton or any other city.
A couple of comments in response to that. And first of all, thank you. The drafting of any sign code is fraught with First Amendment peril. It is. A couple things mitigate against that in this situation. First of all, you need to think of these almost as functional utility signs. These are signs that are city signs in your right-of-way, very much think of them almost like speed limit signs. They're not that, of course. They are going to have these decorative symbols to try and identify the characteristics of the community on them, but they have a utility aspect to them, and that's the way that we framed it purposefully. They are in your control, and the case law is very clear that you have the right to do that, and you have the right to make those forms of expression as a city government. So that's why what we have done it this way. When the original project was conceived, there was how can we figure out exceptions to the sign code that would allow these groups to do it themselves within the city right-of-way, and that didn't work for the very reasons we're talking about. Is once you open up those exceptions to allow these private actors to speak, you pretty much have to be you have to provide equality throughout the spectrum of speech, and that's not going to be doable. So this is a very limited city sign, a city utility sort of sign that's going to have these characteristics on it. It's a good question.
Good. Karen, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for Alice. As I understand this, they would have to come before us, before the design review board and before us for approval every time they really change signs, or else they could present something to us and say they're going to change it for these 4 signs for the 4 seasons, and we could approve all 4 at one time. And the sign we would know what the sign was going to look like, what the size of the sign was, and what area they were going to cover.
That's correct.
Okay, because I would prefer then we not go into a whole lot of other details. We can always deny it if we don't like it. So I would prefer that we not go into a lot of other details. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion unless there's other.
I think we've got a couple more questions.
A couple more questions.
Then I'd like to make a motion once he finishes, please.
Councilmember Lusk.
Seems to be a lot of concern here about the definition of the installation along Highway 9. And I guess in the interest of specificity, and since these signs are going to be in the right-of-way, I would define it as the Highway 9 right-of-way or Highway 9 public right-of-way, which I think fairly well defines the limitations, and might further state Highway 9 right-of-way between the county line and the city of Alpharetta line.
Julie, do you have a question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I guess 2 things that come to mind as I hear more conversation about Highway 9. In addition to this not yet having gone to the Planning Commission, was this taken to the Highway 9 committee that we put in place to review Highway 9?
No, it was not.
I think, again, this body has put forward committees that oftentimes we speak about the importance of our volunteers and the commitments that they've made. I can't imagine that it would take much for us to have those 2 groups, the Planning Commission, the Highway 9 Committee, which is comprised of folks that we've appointed, to just take a look at this so that we can say, gee, we've given those committees that we put in place the opportunity to review this and be comfortable. I do understand the balance between overly defining the document, and yet I do believe that without some reference to frequency and size, and I did hear Councilmember Thurman's question about it would come before us, and I'll ask Mr. Gerard this question. Based on my quick review of a revision that we've only been given this evening, the frequency and size is not discussed, so that still leaves it very subjective. And so I'm assuming that somebody could come forward and ask for a sign on every pole, and it could be size parameters that go beyond our sign ordinance. Is that correct? I mean, just in terms of how the request could come forward.
They could ask for that, yes, ma'am.
And again, I support a community sign process. I just think that we have an opportunity in short order, and this is the first time it's been before us, if we could modify it, verify how Highway 9 should be defined, give at least a little bit of clarification, if nothing else, to confirm what I just heard a fellow council member state, which is when it comes to us, we'll know the frequency, we'll know the size of sign, because that's really not outlined here. So I just think it would be prudent if we took just a few weeks and, in fact, would ask how quickly, if it was the pleasure of this entity to give our Planning Commission and our Highway 9 Committee, could we see it back here in short order, say, in July? And I guess that would be a question for both our city attorney and Mrs. Wakefield, whether or not this would come back to us, in as quick as 2 weeks or...
I will answer only from the standpoint that I don't know when the Highway 9 Committee meets. From the standpoint of getting it back on the agenda, it's simply subject to how quickly you get back on pursuant to your rules.
Right,
There's
so we
no
have another one, I
public
think,
hearing
July
requirement.
6th and then one on the 20th, if I'm not mistaken. And this was never on a work session. If I'm not mistaken, this was also not on a work session. So this has really been our first opportunity to dialogue about it.
That's correct.
I think, Bert, you have a question?
I just have to think on the frequency and size and all that issue. It may be a little different for the highway, the other area. Whatever that area's name is, TBD area, or Crabapple or Birmingham, it may be that you make them more frequent in one area and less frequent or size or this, that, and the other. And I think those would need to be defined as the area comes to us versus in the broad document here. I think some of those things would come to light at that time. Also, I'd agree with Councilperson Thurman. Hopefully it's here's your 4 seasons or 3 seasons or whatever. And if that's our program that we're presenting, if that was to change, then it would come back again through this whole process.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm hearing on the whole Highway 9 area, it's not so much about the signs, but I think it's the connotation and what we're calling it. So I think we need to separate that from this specific issue we're talking about.
And it's also, I don't want to shortchange ourselves either. Like, I don't want people to read this and say, oh, Highway 9 commercial corridor, and say that we're only talking about Highway 9. Because as Councilmember Diaversa pointed out, there could be a need on Deerfield and Windward Parkway as well.
Yeah, it's the entire area, and it's almost like in all the areas you could define it more as the commercial areas of each area of the city. But I also have a question to Alice. Typically, our signs don't go before the Planning Commission, do they?
Well,
Or would they?
typically the signs, they go before the Planning Commission if there's an amendment to the sign ordinance. But this is a policy document, so we did take it to the Planning Commission because it wasn't dealing with zoning.
Okay. All right. I'm going to kind of go ahead and wrap this up. I think everyone's had plenty of time. I think we had a motion on board, and then welcome to have discussion after that. Councilmember Thurman.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve agenda item number 09-883, a resolution establishing the City of Milton Community Identification Sign Program as revised, given to us this evening. And I'd like to change number 2, where it says established or unique areas, to say Crabapple Crossroads, as defined by the City of Milton Overlay, Birmingham Crossroads as defined in the City of Milton Overlay, and the Highway 9, Windward Parkway, Deerfield Parkway corridor as appropriate, or just quarter period?
That's fine. I think quarter period.
Quarter period.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember Hewitt. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. Your question brought another question to mind, and that is, I heard Mrs. Wakefield say that typically an amendment to our sign ordinance by process would go to the Planning Commission, and I guess my question would just be for our city attorney. I think I heard that this effectively, it does modify our sign ordinance, it's just doing it in a more creative way. So is it fair to say that legally, I mean, this is introducing a mechanism for signs that doesn't currently exist in our existing sign ordinance?
Are you asking me if I think it's a code amendment? I don't. I don't think it's an amendment to the sign code.
And that really wasn't my question.
Oh,
That's okay. Is whether or not it's effectively it's a creative mechanism to allow us to handle signage in areas separate from our sign code.
I do, but your sign code affects how private entities within the city can erect signage. This affects and is an internal resolution on how the city of Milton can erect signage in its own right-of-way.
Right, I understand that. And just for the record, I do support a program. I do believe, however, as a function of process, we owe it to our volunteers that sit on our Planning Commission and on our Highway 9 Overlay Committee to have seen this. I think it would have been advisable for us to have a discussion at a work session. It does seem to be unusual that the first time we see a revised document is this evening with no work session and without any review or input from our Planning Commission and no input from our committee members, who I do have a tremendous amount of respect for on that Highway 9 committee. For that reason, I can't support the motion this evening. I do support this program. I just believe it would have afforded some really good minds beyond these 7 to just provide input, which may have provided no change, but just the courtesy of a review by some folks that we've put in place. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Now, for clarification, this is a resolution. This isn't a change to any kind of ordinance, correct?
No, ma'am. I do not believe it is a change to the ordinance.
Okay.
Okay.
I have one question. I know that you had said before that you had said that the sign ordinance deals with how private entities would deal with their signs, the type of signs, what's in the signs, etc. But we've also said before that it wouldn't be in the best interest of the city, and normally cities don't choose to do this. We would not want to be in violation of our own ordinance. Is that correct? I mean, that's just generally a unstated rule that we go by.
It's yes. I mean, some cities and other counties embrace that, and some don't. But yes, as a general rule, that's what's guided this council.
Okay. And I guess that's my conflict with how this is really not. It's not contradictory to our sign ordinance, but in effect, if what we've seen before us is what we carry forward through the approval process, it's kind of in violation of our sign ordinance, or no? Or because our sign ordinance doesn't address those types of signs, then it's not in conflict with our sign ordinance.
I don't think that the city sign code, and Alice, please check me on this, I don't think it would allow private signage in your right-of-way, but the city sign code allows city-erected signs in your right-of-way, and I think that was the whole genesis of this, was to how we get it out of the concerns of the First Amendment.
Okay. If there's no other questions, I have a motion and a second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Records reflect that 6-1. Council members Honor Bailey in opposition. Motion passed.
The city clerk, please sound the next item.
Next, we have approval of a change order in the amount of $392,200, revising the City of Milton and CH2M Hill contract for additional services for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, known as NPDES, permit compliance for 2009. That's agenda item number 09884. Mr. Carter Lucas.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and City Council, this additional service is being offered to assist the city with compliance with their 2009 stormwater requirements. Those stormwater requirements are generated from 2 main components. They're established by our NPDES stormwater permits, as well as the requirements of the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District. Both of these regulatory programs are intended to establish several objectives. One, it's really a transition from a reactive to a proactive approach in the management of our stormwater facilities, and an improvement of water quality from non-point sources of pollution. So these are sources of pollution from rainwater as it travels across the ground and picks up contaminants, fertilizers, animal waste, as opposed to point sources as sewer plants and industrial-type facilities. To achieve these goals, the program has several key elements: education and involvement of the general public, monitoring our water quality, identifying and mapping the system components, and then developing a program to maintain the functionality of these components. Also goes on to establish some regulatory measures which help protect future development from future flood hazards. When you look back at where these requirements come from, first was the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, our permit compliance, or the NPDES permit. This was established under federal law in the Clean Water Act, and it requires operators such as the City of Milton to reduce pollutants to the maximum extent possible. Milton's been issued a Phase 2 permit, and that's what we're operating under right now, and we're audited each year on our compliance with that permit. The NPDES program has established a series of minimum control measures that we'll talk about throughout this presentation: public education and outreach, participation of the general public, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site runoff, post-construction runoff control, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping. The other component of our stormwater requirements comes from the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District. This district was created in 2001 to coordinate issues within the 15-county metro area, and has really established three major plans: the Watershed Management Plan, wastewater plans, and water supply plans. Most of what we'll be talking tonight comes from the Watershed Management Plan. So the components of both the district requirements and the NPDES program are really tied together. And in fact, many of the components required by the district are tied into our stormwater permit from NPDES. The scope of services that has been established, you'll see, was broken out into 10 items. First thing I'd like to touch base on in that scope is there are 4 items that are currently identified for the city contract. Those four items are the printing of the pamphlets, the contract for the retrofit and evaluation of the NRCS dams, and the contract for the third-party stream monitoring. Just so you know that those items are currently budgeted, and as late as Friday, our discussions with Fulton County, it's entirely possible that the contract for the habitat and biological monitoring will be covered by the county. So we'll continue to monitor that, and that may not be something that the city needs to take on at this particular time. When you step through the task orders, Task 1 and Task 2 are really our public education and participation portions of the program. That's the design and drafting of the pamphlets that will be distributed. Those can be distributed both through the school systems, handouts, in our business license, however we deem appropriate for those. It's drafting and submitting two stormwater articles that will be published in the paper, maintaining our website, and marking of 100 storm drains, and the participation and coordination in one streamside cleanup. Task 3, when we talk about the illicit discharge and detection program, this is an opportunity for the city to find pollutant sources that we may not be aware of. Illicit connections to our storm sewer system. And what this will involve is dry screening of 30% of the known outfalls by the end of the year. And so during dry periods, when we don't have the dilution from stormwater, the testing would be to go out and observe those outfalls for odor, color, sediment. We'll test for pH, temperature, and conductivity. And then the testing will increase based on the results of those. So you may go on and test for fluorides and surfactants, which are detergents and paints, herbicides, those types of things. And depending on the results of those tests, you may also test for fecal. Task 4, which is our MS4 inventory, or our municipal separate storm sewer system, that's where we really get into the inventory of the system. This helps us establish kind of a baseline of what our current system is, and begins to establish a capital improvement program for the future. Through the end of 2009, we are to have inventoried 50% of our system. Right now, we estimate that system includes about 2,200 structures. As we move forward, we're looking at an additional 20% each year. So by the end of 2010, we'll be looking at 70% of the system, and actually 30% by the end of 2011 to get to 100% of our system inventoried at that point. Our inventory is going to include a general location of the structure, size and material, and condition of that structure. And so based on that, that's when we begin to really establish what our actual inventory, the condition of our inventory, and potential capital programs will be. Task 5 is our stormwater, post-construction stormwater management. From this point, what we do is we begin to inspect existing stormwater management facilities. These are facilities that are out there, stormwater ponds and the like, and coordinate with property owners on best practices, best management practices with those ponds, maintenance activities that need to be handled with those ponds. And so we're looking for 20 stormwater management facilities, and identification of an additional 20% for the 2010 program. Each year from then on, we'll add 20% to that. Operation and maintenance of these facilities. This really ties back to Task 4 in the MS4 inventory. This establishes a proactive program where we're inspecting these systems and cleaning them before problems start to occur. So in our previous years, we did 10% of the system. By the end of 2009, we're expected to do an additional 20%, or a total of 30% of the system, which would be about 670 structures inspected and cleaned by the end of 2009. And again, in all of these activities, we're phasing this program in. So in future years, we'll see an additional 20% until we get the entire system inventoried. From the maintenance standpoint, our goal is to have a 5-year program where every structure is inspected and maintained over a 5-year period. Task 7 is our pollution prevention, the good housekeeping portion of the program. This is an in-house training where we have discussions with staff and our contractors regarding proper maintenance activities, disposal of debris, maybe on the proper use of herbicides and pesticides, any of those activities which affect the general quality of the water and stormwater issues. We'll continue our normal street cleaning activities in the support of the Adopt a Road program, and a water quality assessment of 30 existing stormwater facilities. So in addition to the inventory that we've done in the previous tasks, the water quality assessments goes back and tries to determine if those ponds could be effectively retrofitted to provide better water quality than what they may be now doing. So we look at maybe the installation of trash racks or debris screens, landscaping in the facilities that may help with nutrient uptake and stabilization of the facilities, or just simple, ordinary maintenance to those facilities. And then those recommendations are taken back to the property owners. And again, on these activities, too, we're looking at an additional 20% that would be required in future years. One of the other tasks that's required from the district is coordination with the other plans. And so most of what we've talked about here tonight and this permit deals with will be those components from the watershed management plan. In addition to that plan, the district has developed the long-term wastewater plan and the water supply and conservation plan. And most of what we'll be doing with that is coordination with the county to ensure the success of their programs. Task 9 is the development of the future flood plan. A little bit different than our FEMA requirements, the district is requiring that the jurisdictions develop future floodplain models. So this is a floodplain based on future land use, either from the future land use maps or from the best available information that we have. This particular task will define the drainage basins throughout the city, but we'll do a detailed study in the southern portion of the city in the Cooper-Sandy Creek Basin. This is phased in. The district allows the communities to phase these studies in so that the citywide future floodplain maps would be completed by 2013. And then finally, task 10 is our project management. So this would involve the supervision of all the NPDS permit requirements, the district requirements, the development of the annual report, and our monthly reporting on that. And with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Bill?
Hey, Carter. Your key program elements, the last item there is establish adequate regulatory measures to protect development of future flood hazards. Aren't these regulatory measures already established by the state?
They are, and we've actually adopted the ordinance. And what this really refers to is the development of the future floodplain map. And so we have the ordinance in place that requires regulating to that future floodplain. We just need to develop the map to support that ordinance.
In your task force, or task 4 inventory, mentioned locating all of these structures. Are you going to locate them with GPS coordinates?
The initial one that was done by IMS, we have some of that done. This study, where we'll be doing it in the field, will not be with GPS coordinates, but it'll just be mapped by our field crews. So it'll be a best general location that they can tie down.
Is there any reason why we couldn't locate them with GPS?
I don't know that there isn't, other than whether or not they have access to the equipment. But we can certainly look into that.
Your operation and maintenance goal is to cycle every 5 years. Have you accounted for any growth in that period?
Well, it certainly is a task that could grow as we begin to grow. And in fact, all of these tasks are based on the best available information that we have. And so the numbers of facilities that we have out there, the numbers of structures that we have out there, we certainly would expect those to grow. And as they grow, we would modify the program to fit those and modify our requirements through the permit.
On your task 8 with water planning district coordination, coordination with of the plan requirements with Fulton County, how does that come into play since we've taken over all of the roads?
That's right. It's coordination through the water conservation plan and the wastewater plan that the district has developed. And so in support of those plans, we would take whatever steps we can to assist them at the local level, septic tank maintenance, providing information to homeowners on water conservation. Those things that we can help on, the district is requiring us to coordinate those with the county.
And the last question, what group in your organization is actually going to do this?
Actually, David Chastant with our stormwater group is here, and he's been instrumental in the development of this. And Jim Seba, who has worked up here with you all in the past, will be leading that effort. And they're both here. They're half the audience.
Good man.
50%.
All right, Bill.
Good representation.
Okay.
No, I
Tina?
have one question. One question that may have multiple parts, I should say. I understand the scope of service is as you explained very thoroughly and nice presentation, and then having read this document as well, is there any greater breakout on what the $392,000 is? Is there any other, are there groups, are there consultants that we're hiring? And is this something that is expended by the end of this fiscal year of 2009?
It is expended by the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
So it
So
is.
by December, this will all be done, except for the things that look like they are extended to 2013?
This will all be done. In following years, we would come back and there'd be additional services to pick up those items that come in years 10, 11, and 12.
So how does the $392,000 expand over that time period?
It doesn't. The 392 just covers the permit compliance for 2009.
Okay, so then in 2010, we'll have
2010
additional
will
money
have
for
additional.
compliance.
That's right. That's right.
And that's about the same amount of money or less?
It's probably about the same amount of money, and I think what you'll see over the years is as we begin to understand what the system is and what we have out there, some of the money that is involved in inventory and in inspections will roll towards capital programs. And so your capital budget and repairing the issues that we're bound to find out there will generally increase. But over the next 3 to 4 years, I would guess this funding level would be about the same.
And there's, I guess I have to ask this, especially given our budget cuts and the tremendous work that y'all have gone through to get those budgets balanced. There's no way to save any of this. There's no greater reduction like what Bill was referencing with GPS locators as opposed to more costly locators. This is as cheaply or inexpensively as we can handle the process.
We looked very hard at trying to reduce costs in this, and at 392, we are over $40,000 less than what was budgeted.
Under our budget.
And so
we do currently have budgeted.
So we have tried to do whatever we can before we brought it to mayor and council to get that price down in a reasonable range.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one.
Julie and Alan?
Go ahead, Alan. You want to say what
I just have one quick question, and maybe I missed something. Test 4 to do the municipal separate storm sewer system. And the first bullet point under there, develop a storm sewer map. Please enlighten me. What has Fulton County not already done that? I mean, we inherited the sewer system from them. Do they not have an inventory of the existing sewer?
No, sir.
Storm sewers?
Not that I'm aware of. We did an initial assessment of the structures through the IMS program, and that really kind of gave us dots on a map about where the structures were. What this will do, we'll go back out and confirm the location and what we have been doing under our permit last year, as well as how do those dots connect. And so this will start picking up the pipes between those structures that are shown on the original IMS inventory that we did 2 years ago, and establish sizes, conditions, types of materials that are out there. But I'm not aware that Fulton County ever performed that activity up here on the north side. In fact, they are just, as far as I know, just in process of doing that in other parts of the county. Is that right?
Okay, Julie, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Logblum, you and I had some discussion about this, and I'd like to just follow up on a couple of the points that I'd raised previously. Obviously, almost $400,000, it's a big chunk of money. One of the questions I had posed earlier was whether or not we had an opportunity before us to go out and get some competitive bids, because it is such a large amount of money. I know that part of the response I'd gotten, but I think it's important for the collective body to perhaps at least hear the same response I did. From a timing perspective, it's my understanding that there perhaps was not enough time to go and get some alternative bids. So maybe we can start there, and then I have a few follow-up questions.
Sure. Yeah, very candidly, very simply, starting this project on June the 1st, which is of certainly no fault of the council and legitimately not much fault of the staff, and that we just didn't have anybody to jumpstart this thing at the beginning of the year. At this point, I really believe this is the one option that the city has to be able to meet compliance by December the 31st. I'm not comfortable sitting here telling you that if we did a 60-day bid process that we could award something that we could meet the deadline of December the 31st.
And I think that's important. Thank you for clarifying that, Chris, because obviously this is not something that we want to be out of compliance with. It's important. It's an important statement about our environment as a community. With that as a backdrop, however, as I've listened to Mr. Lucas's presentation, it was very helpful. Thank you. A couple of questions that just jumped out, and this may go back to some conversations and meetings I've had with Mr. Seba, along with members of the Milton Grows Green Committee. Again, just knowing that some of these dollars and knowing that Councilmember DeVersa had asked whether or not there's a maybe more detail behind the $392,000. Some of these tasks are tasks that our volunteers and volunteer committee members have been very engaged with, including the Milton Grows Green Committee. We've been doing it really at no cost, including public outreach, including Rivers Alive, including storm drain markers. And so when I think about $400,000, and obviously much of that has to do with things other than the public outreach, but I would ask, and I don't know how we do it in tonight's forum, if we could give a little bit of a sharpened pencil to some of those tasks whereby I know that we've had some volunteer efforts that could really help to meet the permitting requirements. And I think that it would only do this process justice if at least I asked for you to please go back and at least make sure that some of those things whereby we've had volunteers and a lot of hard work and effort that goes obviously prior to 2009 that are helping the city to be in compliance in several of these critical areas, that we ensure that we're not paying a third party for those things that have already been taking place and that continue to take place in terms of demonstrable professional public outreach through Milton Grows Green and other efforts, including some of us on this body. So if we could just make sure that we're not double dipping or double paying for things that volunteers are helping to do, I'd appreciate that. And I don't know how we do that this evening. I know we need to move forward. Chris, I don't know if you want to speak to that or Carter.
If I may, we did take some of those things into account. Having been through this with last year's permit and been involved with that with Jim Seba, we really did try to take into account those activities that were assisted through the committees and the volunteer efforts. And that was one of the reasons why we were able to get so far under what the current budget was by looking at those types of activities. So I think we have done that, and we tried to do that to the best of our ability before we brought it forward.
Okay, so some of that $50,000 savings is actually a function of Milton Grows Green efforts and the fact that we've got citizens out that have done storm drain monitoring, that have been providing accounting, that have been doing Rivers Alive events. I think that's important to highlight, that that's where some of that savings then has come from. I'm glad to hear that you've accounted for it. And again, without having the detail of almost $400,000, if there are any other places whereby we can just make sure that we don't have the opportunity for some additional savings, it's obviously a tough economy right now, and the more we can,
Absolutely.
of course, achieve those things, but do it as sensibly as we can. The other, it ties to the, you mentioned septic tank maintenance, and I know that that's something that's near and dear to my heart, that I'd like to see us do a more proactive development of septic tank maintenance, and working in part with our community development department. Could you maybe just speak to whether or not we will actually have a program that could be rolled out before year end that would speak to the public education process from the city out to our citizens as to how we can not only educate them, but then monitor perhaps that septic tank maintenance?
Right, and I think it really comes more from Fulton County. And the septic tank portion of it would be the participation of the city in the septic tank maintenance and education. What that program looks like really is going to be developed by the county. And I don't have a time frame on that for you right now, but it would be rolled in as part of their district requirements also.
And I guess my question would just be, wouldn't we want to proactively participate? And if that's not part of the plan, I would encourage us to proactively participate, because we've got a unique community, and I think we've got an opportunity to be ahead of the curve and perhaps doing some things that might be unique to Milton. And so if that could be integrated, I think that would be important. I think our citizens want to embrace that. It obviously speaks to our kind of non-sewer expansion sort of policies, and I think the sooner we can go ahead and deliver on those septic tanks maintenance issues, the better.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That is one of the requirements for our permit compliance.
Yes, sir.
Also wanted to go back to your comments on stream site cleanup and the marker program. Those are actually part of Task 2, public involvement and participation.
Yes.
They're required to be done by the public.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
And it's our role is to manage it and oversee it.
Correct. And I guess that was my point, is that there's a lot of management that's going on within those volunteer committees, and I just think we need to make sure to acknowledge that, but also to make sure that we're not paying for something that's being overseen in part by some professional folks that are given a lot of their time. So that was really my point on that, and Chris, I trust that you'll obviously give that sharpened pencil along with Mr. Lucas and just make sure that those numbers are as low as they can be in this environment. Thank you, Mayor.
And also, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys did some surveys on other municipalities and whatnot to make sure that we were in the right range on this. So just so our citizens know this wasn't just a blank.
Well, the district did
write a
put
check.
together, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure that, there was some research done to make sure that we were spending an appropriate amount.
The district did put together an implementation cost for the program based on per capita costs. And that range runs anywhere in a community of 29,000 from 180,000 to over 1 million. So it's a little bit difficult to do an apples-to-apples comparison with those numbers, but it certainly gives you a range of what communities are spending on these types of activities.
And I respect the fact they're very important, and I surely appreciate your effort, as I know all of us do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lucas, staff? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of a change order in the amount of $392,200 revising the City of Milton and CH2M Hill contract for additional services for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, NPDES, permit compliance for 2009.
I'll second it.
A motion by Councilmember Hewitt, second by Councilmember Thurman. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Approval of a contract for surveys of Bethwell and Crabapple Community Center properties for $2,125 and for Birmingham Park for $10,822. Item number 09885. Mr. Lucas.
Mayor and City Council, these are boundary surveys for 3 city properties, the Bethwell and Crabapple Community Center properties, as well as a boundary survey for the Birmingham Park property, 200 acres. If there's any questions on that.
Got any questions for Mr. Lucas? Julie?
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the survey and going back to Fulton County, when these parcels were acquired, both individually and then some in tandem, I'm assuming that we're doing this because we don't have legally defined surveys.
I tried my best. I went through the land department with the young lady down there and all the park surveys. We pulled together as many of the surveys as we could and provided those to the bidders for their use in developing their bids. So we
So
looked.
some were provided, just not all. Is that
That's right.
correct?
That's right.
The other thing I would ask is whether or not you, and I'm sure you did, but I'm going to ask anyway, is whether or not you went to Ecos Environmental, which was the third party that had been hired by Fulton County at the time that they were doing the Birmingham Master Plan under Fulton County, because they may have had access to some survey information on that 202 acres that the county may or may not have retained. Did we go to Ecos to get any data that they might have gathered?
Ecos, we didn't. We were well into the bid process when we got this additional information from the county.
Okay.
So the 3 bidders that had originally bid on the project were already established at that point. So we provided those bidders with the additional information that we were able to obtain from the county.
Just a suggestion, in case it would help that end result, would be anything that they do have in the form of surveys could be beneficial, should they have some of that. The other thing I'll bring is a specific parcel, and this is just a footnote for later. Through the recent Birmingham Park cleanup process, one of the landowners that we sought access to in order to do one of the dump cleanups was off of Hickory Flat Road. And through that discovery process and getting his permission to allow us as volunteers access to the back of that parkland, it became clear that his parcels in and of themselves, one of those three, and we can talk about name, et cetera, later, one of those three parcels, though, when it was acquired by Fulton County and ultimately transferred to us, there was some discrepancy in that language, and I'd just like to bring that to your attention so that when we get the survey, we can also resolve the questions that he posed. And again,
Okay.
this is land that is accessed off of Hickory Flat, but it backs up to the parkland, and one of his three parcels ultimately became land that was subsequently acquired by the city of Milton. And so that may or may not be something that's part of your survey process, but I think this would be a great time to be able to address that for that citizen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I assume this is included in the current year budget?
Pardon me?
This is in the current year budget?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, is there any other questions for Mr. Lucas? Okay, do I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Mayor, I put forth a motion to approve a contract for surveys of Bethwell and Crabapple Community Center properties for $2,125 and for Birmingham Park for $10,822.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lusk, second by Councilmember Tartt. Any other discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
City Clerk, please sound the next item.
Approval of a task order for citywide bridge inventory and inspection study with URS for $32,517.26. Item number 09886, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you. Mayor and City Council, this is an expansion of the GDOT bridge inventory that they typically do every 2 years. What this will do is do a more detailed of the 28 structures that are currently covered under the GDOT program, as well as pick up 5 additional structures. We actually have 6, but Landrum Road has already been inspected, so we're not including that in this other than for informational purposes. But pick up the 5 structures that didn't meet the GDOT standards for a detailed inspection. This will go back and either confirm or modify the GDOT inspection report, and in some cases where bridges have been posted, a more detailed evaluation has allowed those bridges to not be posted or modify the repair recommendations. This will also go a long way towards establishing a 5-year capital improvement program and itemizing and prioritizing those bridge repairs that are necessary in our capital program. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I put forth a motion to approve a task order for citywide bridge inventory and inspection study with URS for $32,517.26.
I'll second it.
Have a motion by Councilmember Lusk, second by Councilmember Diaversa. Any discussion? Hearing none.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, moving on to council reports. Do I have any council members that would like to report on something? Bill?
Just briefly, question to Carter.
Yes, sir.
Met with Ed Figley over last week, and I understand their EPD is continuing to evaluate dams throughout the state. Do you have any sense of where we are in evaluating the dams in Milton?
We haven't started that I know of. Part of the task under the NPDS will be the evaluation of at least 8 of the NRCS dams. Some of that is done through community development. There has not been a detailed evaluation of our dams that I'm aware of. Does not mean that it's not out there, but I haven't seen it.
Julie?
I'm just going to expand on the question. On those 8 that are identified under the NPDES, have you already identified which those 8 are?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And just knowing that those 8 may or may not include, just again, going back to that 202 acres, I don't know if, it's a small dam, but because it's city property, I would just encourage us perhaps, even if it needs to be tucked in as one of those 8, but we look at that dam since it's going to potentially have public access. And when we were out there, of course, recently, it deserves some attention. So I don't know through this process how we want to do that, but I would imagine that that could be part of that process so that it gets some attention nearer term versus after 2009.
The 8 dams that were identified under the program are NRCS flood control dams that were built years ago, and this is really an evaluation of those facilities to see if in any way they can be retrofit to provide better water quality.
And I realize that is deemed on who lives, downstream and all those potential public safety issues. Just this topic that brings that to mind, that because in concert with other activities, we obviously want our public lands to be safe for those that may be walking or riding or taking passive activity beneath that dam. So I just bring that up for your consideration.
I'm sure we could roll that in.
In the power easement?
Yep.
The dam we're talking about?
Yep, it's just to the right of it.
Bill?
I would suspect that is not a permitted dam.
I would doubt that it is.
Correct. And that's why I'm suggesting that we perhaps want to go ahead and take the opportunity to look at it now and not wait till 2010.
And just to further that question, Mr. Lucas, could you answer, what did the fish say when he hit the concrete wall?
Damn.
Okay, where's our drum?
Any other questions?
Just a suggestion.
I'm sorry I had to answer that.
All right. Any,
I knew the answer to that.
Karen?
I just want to make sure everyone had July 15th on their calendar for the Crabapple Town Hall meeting. It's going to be held at the Alpharetta Government Center in Crabapple.
What time is that again?
7 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah, just to let you know, I won't be able to attend that meeting. I'll be out of town.
Right. Any other council reports? All right, move on to staff reports, beginning with Mr. Lagerblain.
A couple things tonight, Mayor and Council. First is a real short one. Even though he's not here tonight, I'll let you know that we have had a change in the program manager for this project, who represents CH2M Hill. Pat Crook is no longer with us and has been replaced by Tom Wilson as our program manager effective today. Although he's out of town until Friday, he'll be back, and Tom will be back with us on our Milton team as our program manager moving forward. Item number 2 I want to bring up and want to just lay some groundwork for you and send you with something tonight. Don't necessarily know that we need to have a large discussion because I'd like you to digest what I'm going to send with you, but is kind of an update in the ongoing, I don't want to use the word saga because it's not really, but the ongoing debate as to what is the correct direction for the Hopewell Youth Association and Bell Memorial Park and our influence in youth baseball in Milton, amongst a host of other questions that you may or may not have started to receive emails about. And if you haven't, I'm sure you will soon. I hope the document that I put together is not necessarily persuasive, but more systematically laying out what I've discovered as I've started to try to unravel or peel back that onion to figure out exactly what, in fact, is going on and what the city's responsibility should be to youth baseball and to the Hopewell Youth Association, most importantly to our park that exists there on Thompson Road. So I bring that up also to let you know that there have been, I sent a letter, as I think you may remember we talked about in a staff report at one point, that the Hopewell Youth Association was not in compliance with their facility use permits. And I believe it was the direction of the council, and if it wasn't, this is what I did anyway, was to send a demand letter to the Hopewell Youth Association saying they needed to come into compliance. That was sent and received by certified mail. To date, they have still not come into compliance with that permit. I have been given several dates as to when they intended on coming into compliance with the permit, and to this point they have not. They have asked for 2 things from the city. One is for a permit as it relates to a tournament that is supposed to or would like to happen next weekend. I can tell you that the staff has done everything it needs to do to be able to work through a process with the Hopewell Youth Association to allow that tournament to take place. I've worked with the city attorney, and he and I are set and ready to go. Ken tells me it's less than half an hour process to be able to put together what we need so that they have the right permit.
And that hurt to say.
But I can tell you.
Could you just do it in like 5-6 minute increments, Ken?
He worked it down pretty low.
I already cut him in half. He just doesn't know it yet. He said an hour. I'd give him a half hour. But basically, the closing part to that is I'm not inclined to issue any permits to the Hopewell Youth Association at this point until they come into compliance with their facility use agreement. I'm not necessarily asking you for your support of that, although I'm just really telling you that that's, I think, what needs to happen at this point so that we can actually have them come into compliance with what they're contractually bound to do. They've asked for that permit for a tournament as well as a permit for an extension in their recreation youth baseball program from July the 3rd until July the 31st, to which I have responded to both of those requests that I would be happy to evaluate them and make decisions once they're in compliance with their facility use permit. Preliminarily, I've been told that tomorrow I will see those documents that bring them into compliance. I hope that's the case because I'd really like for our youth to be able to participate this weekend in a tournament, and the city's positioned such that so long as they hold up their end of the bargain, it will not be an issue for this weekend, and as a matter of fact, we'll kick in and make it happen quickly. But I really think we're doing the right thing by we've got an agreement, and at some point I believe that we need to enforce the compliance portion of it. So if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, I'd like to send you with this document that I put together today that really kind of summarizes this ongoing process and what I'm starting to learn. We will need to have discussions, and probably discussions fairly quickly, as to what direction and what involvement we think the city should have in the workings of the Hopewell Youth Association and our park. But I'd really like you the opportunity to digest some of this information before we have that discussion. Any questions on that?
Julie?
What was the date of the letter that you sent to the board certified mail?
I sent it on April the 28th. It was stamped, received May the 6th. I'm sorry.
And that letter asked for them to be in compliance. Was there a timetable?
10 days of receipt.
And that would have been mid-May?
10 business days, so mid to late May.
And you've received no response?
I've received a response that it's coming, and they've acknowledged that it's coming. The most recent date I heard that it was coming was last Friday, and before the close of business, it was not in the city's hands. I can tell you that letter indicated that it was technically received by the city when it was delivered to the clerk's office, and to my knowledge at this point, the clerk has not received any of that information that was requested.
We're not asking for anything that difficult, are we?
We're not. And we're purely asking what is required is reporting requirements of the agreement.
Nothing that they shouldn't have had within 30, 45 minutes could have pulled together based on the information they have if they had done what they should have up front.
I would make that assumption that we are, yes. We are not asking for anything that I would consider to be hard. It should all be.
You're not asking for anything that wasn't in the agreement.
Correct. Yeah.
And Chris, will you be the entity, I mean, the city manager's office will be the group or the entity, obviously you and your staff, as extensive as that staff is, will be the entity that will be reviewing the information, but also based on that information, then an assessment, I'm assuming in conjunction with our Parks and Rec Committee, rather than to make any assumptions, could you just speak to, let's assume, hopefully, that you get some new information this week. What occurs after that?
Well, what occurs after that is obviously we'll go through that information to determine that in fact it does meet compliance with the contract that we have with them. I can tell you that it is my belief that if the HYA brings the information forward that indicates that they have made a good faith attempt to provide compliance with the conditions of the contract that we have, I don't believe it is my place, and I just fundamentally have an issue with me then further standing in the way of our kids who would otherwise play baseball this weekend. So long as I have something that resembles compliance, I'm likely to let kids play this weekend. But that doesn't mean that obviously we give away our further authority we have under the contract to go back and ask for more data if we need to. I certainly am not, and I don't think the council would want any of us to be in a position where we all of a sudden don't allow kids the opportunity to play baseball because of a reporting requirement of a particular board. So provided that something is brought forward in good faith, then I think absolutely I'll meet that with a good faith gesture and at least authorize the permit. I think that answered the short-term part part of your question. The longer term is what's kind of defined in this document, and that's really what philosophically and fundamentally the city wants to see happen with the park long term and its relationship with a particular private entity running baseball programs. And that's just something that we're going to have to we're just going to have to break it apart, make some decisions, and move on.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Thank you. Is any other reports from staff?
No, sir.
Not other than it's Stacy's first day with the city, and she didn't stutter.
We can't say welcome because you're already here, right? So just
Somebody else is writing her
She's
paycheck.
always been here. It's just a technical change. So,
She had to balance that budget so we could write a paycheck.
That concludes our regular meeting. Do I have a motion that we adjourn?
Move to adjourn the meeting.
I need an executive session, Mr.
that's
Mayor.
what
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Did we say that at the beginning?
No. It's on our agenda. Yeah, can we?
Is it needed? But that's so.
We don't need it. Okay, I move
Can-
to.
Do we need it? Do we need an executive session?
We do, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
respectfully. I don't
Okay.
believe it'll take long.
Okay.
Forgive me.
Do I have a motion that we convene into executive session to discuss
Potential litigation.
potential litigation?
I move to convene into executive session.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Councilmember Tart, second by Councilmember Hewitt, third by Councilmember Dunn.
That's unanimous. Meeting adjourned into executive session at 8:17.
Yeah, I was, yeah. You know, if it would have been the right time to engage, because she's, yeah. Yeah, he's not being entirely passionate.
I've already taken this, so it'd be ethics. It could be already sold out. It is, And what I would do then is I would drive back home on Sunday, do what I need to do, then drive back on Monday, stay the night. Y'all are paying for all the rooms and everything? Yeah. Okay. You should be able to check in and say hi, I'm Ellen. Okay. The next thing, the next thing is I would like to take this in Rome on August 10th. So let's do that. You handle it. I would just be, well, I mean, and I don't need room or anything. I just need to drive there in the morning and drive back. How you doing, Sadiq? Good. Doing well. Thank you. You're welcome.
Unless they can read lips, then we should be good.
Motion by Councilmember Luss, second by Councilmember Hewitt to reconvene the meeting.
All those in
And
favor of the
I'd like
motion,
to-
please say aye.
Aye.
Any
I make a
opposed?
motion to adjourn.
I'd like to conclude the regular meeting. Do I have a motion we adjourn?
I make a motion we adjourn. Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Thurman, second by Councilmember Bailey.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned, 9:09.